It's Apple rant time, but before you smash the like or even the dislike button, hear me out. So I'm back from WWDC. I had a chance to see Apple's new products. They start to unfold through the next year. And I started thinking more about Apple. And for those of you guys that don't know, Apple kind of got me started in tech reviewing. They're the first sort of products I reviewed. So I've always kind of had a soft spot in my heart that's never really filtered through, as you guys like to call me out all the time, to my reviews. But I think Apple's got a problem. And I don't think the problem is actually Apple. I think the problem is the competition. The competition's gotten so much better than it was in the past. And look at Apple's product line. There hasn't been an innovative brand new category since the iPad. You could argue the Apple Watch has come out, but it hasn't changed. It hasn't been a paradigm shift since we saw the original iPad. And back then, there was a huge discrepancy between the efficiency of iOS and was Android at the time. And I think when we started to get to around 2011, we saw the Galaxy Nexus, we saw Ice Cream Sandwich, and that was the iPhone 4S, which was coincidentally the last phone that Steve Jobs was alive for. He had his hands, supposedly at least, in the iPhone 5 and the 5S. But that was when things started to sort of get closer and closer for Apple. And Apple's being held, I think, to an unattainable double standard. If they're not reinventing a new category every few years, they're failing. They're failing. They're not doing something great like they used to. And I don't think that's fair, and I'm guilty of that too. I've certainly said Apple's not innovating, there's nothing new coming out, but they've perfected their categories. They've perfected a tablet, they perfected a phone, whether you like the iPhone or not. For a lot of people, that is the perfect device. But the problem they're facing is a perception problem, because the competition, again, has gotten so much better. And again, I think it went back to that 2011 starting point. And you look back at what Samsung started doing, which strangely was 5 years ago when Galaxy S2 launched, when they started parodying the Apple lines. You know, the next big thing. And that hit Apple where it hurt, I think. That hit the perception, that hit the image that Apple was this impenetrable, gigantic innovation machine. And slowly but surely, those little pieces started to get chipped away. And what you have right now is a company that is clearly firing on all cylinders. They're selling millions and millions of phones. They're the largest manufacturer for a ton of different categories. But they're still being held to that double standard. And again, I'm guilty of that as well. But now the competition. That's where you look at things like the Galaxy Tab S3, you look at the Galaxy S8 and the LG G6. You take from a feature standpoint, the gap that used to be there between Android and iOS is no longer there. And certainly an argument could be made that Android has surpassed Apple on the feature standpoint. The easy argument to make here is that Steve Jobs is rolling over in his grave. But Tim Cook's job is not to make you happy or me happy. Tim Cook's responsibility is to the shareholders. And Apple stock is at an all-time high. So in a lot of ways, Tim Cook is doing an incredible job. People are buying products. They're offering new ways into Apple's ecosystem. And the more they sell and the more money they make, it seems that perception isn't changing with it. It used to be Apple was incredible, they were untouchable, like I said, but now it's, I'm not that excited about the next iPhone. And for me to say that is something I haven't said in years. You know, I feel like for the past almost 3 or 4 years, I make this analogy in the office all the time, I feel like I'm someone crazy guy outside with an umbrella screaming it's gonna rain. And on the day it rains, I'm gonna seem brilliant. But the other 364 days of the year, I look like a crazy person. And every time there's a new iPhone, I feel like I'm out there saying, this is the year we're gonna get wireless charging, it's gonna be fast charging, you're gonna get feature parity with Android. And it just hasn't happened. And at least for me, I don't look at Apple the same way that I used to. I don't look at Apple the same way as this paradigm of innovation. Not to say they're not, but that perception has changed for me personally, and I feel like it's changing for partly you guys as well. And not to say the products aren't good, not to say the phone you have in your pocket is a crappy device, you made a wrong choice. If it works for you, it's a perfect choice. But the competition that Apple's facing, that they faced back in 2007 versus what they face now, is different. When the iPhone first launched, for example, which is sort of when the modern Apple started, you know, they're not facing the likes of the Moto Q. They're not facing BlackBerry anymore. It's an Android onslaught, and because there's so many manufacturers, they're fighting battles on multiple fronts. They're not fighting just Apple versus what was RIM at the time. It's now Apple, and it's LG, it's Samsung, it's the Chinese brands. There's onslaughts from every direction. And Apple's really done an incredible job still selling these devices and still making profit hand over foot. But the problem is competition. And the competition's just gotten better over time. So whether you think they're better than Apple is kind of up to you. But I sort of had this, I don't know if it was an epiphany, but a thought. And my whole time I've been thinking this was that the problem was Apple. What is Apple doing wrong? And I realized I was holding them to double standard too. You can't reinvent a new category that's not there every few years. You're just gonna sort of force something that doesn't need to be there, and then you get criticized for it. So those are my ramblings. That was my thought on Apple. Do you guys agree? Am I way off here? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that they don't have to invent new product categories. If they keep doing what they're doing and selling millions of devices, honestly, why do they have to change? Tim Cook is selling devices, stock price is an all-time high, investors are happy, and that is his first and foremost responsibility. So, agree or disagree? I genuinely want to know. Try to be civil in the comments. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Until next time, I'm John Rettinger from Techno Buffalo.